In today's episode, we're getting in touch with our feminine side. Welcome to Licensure Lifeline. This is your host, Matt Lawson. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about feminist theory. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, check us out on Instagram. I post flashcards and other things relevant to the show there. I'm also slowly venturing into the world of Etsy and creating some downloadables there for people. If you want to check that out as well, would love to see and get some feedback on what is needed, what is liked, what's disliked, things like that. I think I only have like 2 things up there right now. I'm just trying to test things out and see if it's something that would work. All right, let's get into feminist therapy now. I think one of the biggest misconceptions of this therapeutic approach is this is just about treating women. And actually, it's really about empowering everybody. This therapeutic modality emerged during the feminist movement back in the 60s and 70s and really challenged the traditional power imbalance often seen in a therapeutic relationship, which has been pretty male dominated. And especially back then, it was very much so male dominated. But the feminist movement really sought to challenge the patriarchy and advocate for gender equality. During the 60s and 70s, women therapists, including individuals like Phyllis Chesler, Laura Brown, Jean Baker Miller, and Kara Gilligan, noticed that traditional therapy models often marginalized women's experiences and needs. A lot of the testing, a lot of the therapeutic development was really based off understandings and observations of white men. So you can imagine how skewed that information was when it really was just looking at one in particular perspective and creating therapeutic approaches based off of that one male perspective. Adding a little insult to injury, the leading assumption that women's struggles really stemmed from internal factors rather than external societal influences like sexism, discrimination, and oppression. The women I just mentioned, some of these figures that really paved the way for this therapeutic feminist modality, considered this power imbalance or just power imbalances in general, in both personal and professional worlds. Feminist therapy shifted the focus to systemic issues, viewing problems through a lens that acknowledged the influence of cultural, political, and social expectations. I don't know if you know anybody right now that could really benefit from taking some of this worldview into account. I was just talking to a colleague not too long ago, just a couple of weeks ago, about how much of the therapy that I'm doing has shifted to politics, has shifted to the environment, with people really bringing up significant concerns and anxieties and depression just around these issues, these systemic issues. I also do a lot of work with just systemic racism in my practice and the impact that this has on individuals as well. Out of that list of women that I shared earlier, Jean Baker Miller is a pretty significant pivotal, not that they all aren't significant, they all are. But Jean Baker Miller wrote the book Toward a New Psychology of Women, which played a really critical role in the development of relational cultural theory. And then also Carol Gilligan made major contributions with her research on moral development, highlighting the women's ethical decision-making and how it's rooted in relationships and care, contrasting the justice-oriented frameworks that were prominent during that time. All right, let's talk some of the key concepts in feminist theory. The personal is political. Feminist theory emphasizes that personal struggles often stem from systemic oppression. A woman's anxiety, for instance, may not just be an internal issue, but could be the result of living in a society that devalues her voice. Another key concept here is empowerment. Clients are viewed as the experts of their own lives. The goal is to empower them by validating their experiences and providing them with tools to reclaim control over their lives. This is one of those theoretical approaches that I kind of keep in the back of my mind when I work with people. Not kind of, I do keep in the back of my mind when I work with people. I really like the empowering aspects of this approach, and I find it to be extremely helpful with individuals as they explore their worlds, as they really talk about what they're struggling with, and how to get them back to a place that better aligns with what their ideal is of themselves and of the world that they want. Therapeutic equality in therapy is the traditional power dynamic between the therapist and the client is minimized. The therapist and the client collaborate as equals, working together to explore the client's challenges. You're going to see this idea of collaboration talked about a lot in some of the in a lot of the modalities used. Collaboration versus setting yourself apart as the expert just works better. It shows that the individual that you're working with, that you're part, that they're part of a team. Cultural competence also plays a huge role in feminist therapy. It really requires the deep understanding of a client's cultural context. I love the fact that this modality takes cultural competency and puts it as part of a key concept within the therapeutic approach. Really understanding where that individual comes from, the nuances of their cultural background that may be impacting their world, it just becomes something that is extremely important and should be considered really with everybody you work with. The last one here is social action. I don't think this gets enough attention, but in feminist therapy, clients are encouraged to engage in social activism and advocacy as a way of coping with systemic issues that affect their lives. Therapy doesn't just focus on internal changes, but also aims to inspire external changes in the client's community or society. This is something I'm also using a lot of lately. I have individuals that are really struggling with the current political climate, and a lot of them just don't know what to do with themselves. They're getting really wound up from the social media and the news reports that they're watching, and they're stuck with all this energy and not really know what to do with it. And we talk about things like, why don't you go out and advocate in your community? Talk about your beliefs, talk about the things that you want to see in the world, and connect with other individuals around that. I really believe in this idea of the ripple effect when it comes to things like this. If somebody can advocate at a smaller grassroots level, it can have ripple effects that could affect things on a larger scale. All right, let's get into some questions regarding feminist theory. No multiple choice this time. I'm just going to see if you can put together an explanation. So, first question: what is meant by the personal is political in feminist therapy? All right, the answer to this phrase highlights that many personal challenges are rooted in a broader social issue. For example, feelings of inadequacy in women might stem from societal expectations of beauty or success. Feminist therapy focuses on addressing these systemic factors as well as the individual's internal experience. Question number 2: how does feminist therapy aim to address power imbalances in therapeutic relationships? Unlike traditional models, where the therapist is seen as the expert, feminist therapy promotes equality between therapist and client. Remember that collaborative approach. The client's voice is valued as much as the therapist's expertise. Question number 3: in what ways does feminist therapy incorporate intersectionality? Intersectionality in feminist therapy means considering how different aspects of a client's identity, such as race, class, and sexual orientation, affect their experiences of oppression or privilege. This makes the therapy more culturally competent and relevant to each individual's lived experiences. Question number 4: how does feminist therapy empower clients to create change in their lives? Empowerment is central to feminist therapy. Clients are encouraged to take control of their own narrative and make active decisions to challenge oppressive structures in their lives, whether that's in their personal relationships or through social activism. What role does social action play in feminist therapy? Feminist therapy goes beyond individual change and often includes encouraging clients to engage in social or political actions as a form of healing and empowerment. For example, a client may be encouraged to participate in community organizing as a way of addressing systemic oppression. All right, that is going to be it for the questions. I hope you guys got something out of those. I really like feminist therapy. I think it does really well with filling in some of the spaces and approaches like CBT and DBT and REBT, all those acronyms. And I, I use it mainly to add that level of individuality to the work that I do with people. But I got some resources here if you want to check out more about feminist therapy. Check out the book Toward a New Psychology of Women. That was the book that I mentioned before from Jean Baker Miller. Feminist Therapy, Theory and Practice by Laura S. Brown. There's also a really cool podcast, Therapist Uncensored. This podcast offers and explores gender and power and social justice. So, really connecting with feminist therapy. And there's a really cool article, The Ethics of Care by Carol Gilligan, which outlines Gilligan's theory of moral development. And that's going to be another show. Thank you so much for listening. Again, make sure you check us out on Instagram. And until next time, keep studying.